Hello all, my name is Yossi, and in today's lesson I will try and demonstrate the importance of paying attention to details of the biblical story. I plan on keeping this and all future videos as short and as to the point as possible. While this video is not long enough to cover the entire subject, I do hope to demonstrate the importance of paying attention to detail. This lesson is dedicated to the memories of my parents, my father and teacher Avraham Shmuel ben Simcha Bunim, and my mother and teacher Chana Bat Shimon. There's no biblical story that's more controversial than the story of David and Bat Sheva. The story paints Israel's greatest king in a very bad light. It leaves some of our greatest commentators speechless, and others searching for ways to exonerate David of what seem to be obvious and base crimes, while others yet acknowledge David's guilt of the lowest kinds of sin. Yet in our role as pshat people who are interested in the simple meaning of the text, we have to pay attention to the details. We need to disconnect ourselves from our preconceived notions and read the text as investigators searching for the truth. Well, let's start with a quick review of 2 Samuel chapter 11. David's army is off to war, and he remains in the palace. He sees a beautiful woman from the palace roof and asks who she is. She's told that she's Bat-Sheba, the wife of David's warrior, Uriah, that's Uriah the Hittite. She's brought to David, who sleeps with her. She returns home and later informs David that she's pregnant. David summons Uriah from the front and questions him and sends him home to wash up. Yet instead of going home, Uriah chooses to sleep together with the king's servants at the palace entrance. David asks him why he doesn't go home, and Uriah replies that he cannot because the ark and his comrades are in the field, and that it would be wrong for him to go home to eat and drink and sleep with his wife in such a situation. Well, David tells Uriah to stay overnight in Yerushalayim, that's Jerusalem, and that he will send them back the next day. Uriah indeed stays overnight, and David summons him the next day. He feeds Uriah a good meal, and he gets him drunk, and yet once again Uriah does not go home. Instead, he spends the night sleeping together with the king's servants. The next day, David gives Uriah a letter to give to his commander, Yoav. In it, he commands Yoav to position Uriah where the battle is fiercest, ensuring his death. And indeed, Uriah is killed in battle, at which point David takes Bat-Sheba into the palace after her mourning period is over. And the next day, God sends Nathan, the prophet, to go to David and to tell him how displeased God is with him. Nathan relates the parable of a rich man who slaughters a poor man's lamb in order to feed his guest. David passes harsh judgment on the rich man in the parable, to which Nathan replies, "You are the man." David immediately repents, and God immediately forgives him of his sin. This is not a nice story. Adultery, murder, cover-up. There's some very strange things about the story as well that we should pay attention to. So let's ask some questions. Why is there no condemnation of Bat-Sheba? How are David and Bat-Sheba permitted to marry, something prohibited to adulterers according to Torah law? And how can God love their second son, Solomon? Deuteronomy 23:3 says, Lo yavo mamzer b'kal Hashem, gam dor asiri lo yavo b'kal Hashem. A mamzer, a child of forbidden relationship, shall not enter the assembly of the Lord. Even the 10th generation shall not enter the assembly of the Lord. And how about Psalm 51? The one that says in verse 6, Lecha levad chatati, to you alone I have sinned. Why, what? What, David didn't sin to Uriah? Well, there are plenty of other questions, but this is enough for now. Let's rewind the tape and take a close look at the replay. 2 Samuel chapter 11, verse 2. And it came to pass at the time of the evening that David rose from his bed and walked upon the roof of the king's house. And he saw a woman bathing from the roof, and the woman was very beautiful. Now remember, we're observers. We must try to be as objective as possible and pay attention to that verse. What's it telling us? And try and picture the scene again. And it came to pass at the time of the evening that David arose from his bed and walked upon the roof of the king's house. And he saw a woman bathing from the roof, and the woman was very beautiful. Do you see the problem? Okay. David is on the roof of his palace. The lighting is poor. It's the time of the evening. He can see the woman. He can see that she's beautiful. Well, even if we don't consider David's age and his eyesight, there's a real question here. What was the distance between David and that beautiful woman? You could see that she was beautiful. Well, it could not possibly have been more than 25 or 35 yards, which leads to the obvious question, why couldn't Uriah go 25 or 35 yards home to say hello to his wife? Well, you could say, well, people didn't behave that way towards their wives back then, but David would have known that. Well, if that's the case, why would he ask Uriah to do something that he knew he wouldn't do? Okay, let's look at another verse and another important detail. Verse 12. And David said to Uriah, stay here today also, and tomorrow I will send you off. And Uriah stayed in Yerushalayim that day and the morrow. Well, the question, why didn't Uriah return to battle? He just gave David an excuse for disobeying David's explicit order to go home. And if the battle was that urgent, why didn't he just disobey David once again? I mean, he had to return to his comrades in the battlefield, right? Okay. I don't have a clear answer for those questions, and the text gives no answer either. But our sages do, but time is short, so I will summarize. The best possible conclusion is that this couple was divorced. They were not planning to get together. And it explains the lack of condemnation of Bat-Sheba. It explains Psalm 51. And conclusion number 2. Well, David's sin, what is it? In my opinion, there are 2 of them. The first is one of his appearance. The story is not a pleasant one, no matter how you look at it. Even if Bat-Sheba was available, David's behavior is very base, it seems, and appearance means a lot when you're a leader, certainly one of David's caliber. The second sin is that what David is lamenting in Psalm 51 is that if you follow David's early history, he's always asking for guidance. Samuel chapter 2, David's middle-aged, and he seems to have stopped asking for that guidance. Whatever the case may be, I hope this demonstrates how important it is to pay attention to details and to see that the pshat contains very important information, but only if we read with care. Thank you, Kol Tuv, and God bless.